Hi everyone, my name is Jessica with fulfilledandabundant.com, and today I get to interview Beatrice Savage. She's a coach, a light worker, and a social influencer. I highly recommend you check out her Instagram feed. It's very inspiring and powerful and beautiful and entertaining too. And her website is beatricesavage.com, and I'll post it below as well. How are you?
I'm great, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me on your YouTube channel.
Thank you. So the reason, I don't even know, because we don't actually know each other, but I noticed your Instagram, it just started popping up on my feed, and everything you post is so positive, so it's just like shining love. And so I was like, oh, she's amazing. So I started liking, all your pictures, and then I started reading your stuff, and it was very beautiful. And I commented on some things, you commented, and here we are.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Grateful for the internet and for social media, right? Because it allows us to be here and connect. Yes.
Yeah. So what inspires you to put so much of your life on social media, but to post such beautiful things? You're also a good photographer, I think.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, that's a really good question, and thank you for that, because I think I haven't really touched upon sort of my deeper inspiration for a while. I think maybe I think a lot of people can resonate with that element of sometimes when you're inspired out of pain, you feel really powerful in the moment of like enough is enough, and you start sharing, and then you also got to go through the motions of dealing with why that pain, and that at one point led me to not wanting to talk about it for a while. So I actually feel really grateful that you asked that question, because then I can sort of go back and talk about it from an empowered place, because what allowed me to, what sort of gave me that motivation and inspiration to start sharing about my life on social media was actually like it seems like a one event, but it rarely is. But it's like but basically breaking out of emotional trauma, childhood trauma. I was living in Portugal at one time. For those who don't know, I'm living in Copenhagen. I'm born and raised in Copenhagen. No, I don't. And I started my business there, and I don't even know how I did that. Sometimes you just do stuff that's like, when you look back, you're like, you don't really know how you made it happen, but somehow you did. Or that was sort of how I ended up in Portugal with my family, my 5 months at the time, and my husband. And actually, when I back up, this is going to be a little bit of a story, but I think I love it because it is such a divine story, actually. I got pregnant, and my husband and I, at the time, boyfriend, we were in a situation where we were living in a place where we actually didn't have a lease. And so it was a bit undercover. And with a child, we felt like, okay, we need to sort of find a more solid foundation. And so I was at the time granted an amount of money from my biological mother that I had also personally contributed to building up. So it was like a plan that was initiated from her, from my mother, with that sort of gift of being a parent and wanting the child to sort of have a good foundation and ability to start my life, me being the child. And so we were looking for a new place to live, and we actually bought a place that was then hijacked, or those people renting from the owner didn't want to move out of that place. And so we were standing in the middle of having all our stuff packed in a box. And at the time, I think our son, who was like 1 month or something, and so we were out of a place to live and trying to sort of postpone, okay, well, can we then move in a month? And we waited a month, and those people squatting the place, they actually didn't want to move. And there was something then about that place that where I started to sort of like feel, okay, well, this is a sign we're not supposed to live here, but then what do we do? And given my husband, he grew up in Latin America, and I'm my parents are from Gambia and Africa, so we both had that sort of feel like we wanted to be a place with their sun, because in Copenhagen, Denmark, it gets kind of dark during the time. And so we thought, well, why not Lisbon? We had a couple of friends who lived there. And so we just thought, let's just leave the darkness and get into the light and basically seek the sun. And so we did. And when we arrived there, I felt home. And
That was fun.
yeah, and the funny thing was that we had actually been in Lisbon a couple of years prior to that. And when we were there in 2014, I had this dream where I actually dreamt that I gave birth to our son that we had with us. The exact same date, the August 28th, that he was actually born. So he was born August 28th, 2017. And I had that dream August 28th, 2014.
Oh, wow.
So divine, right? Those sort of like, yeah. And I feel blessed because I journal and I've done my entire life. So it was just like a random dream that wasn't that random, right? But I wrote it down that date. And years later, I found that script where I was like, what? I experienced this synchronicity. So, but back to when we arrived there in 2017, I just got this idea of starting my own business within clothing. And so I did in Portuguese and started running with it all and investing all the money that I had in it. And at that point, I got distant from my biological mother. And that was sort of the first time that I sort of moved myself away from her. And in that process, I realized some hard truths about our relationship. And I realized the toxicity, is that word in English?
Toxicity.
Yes, thank you. And the codependence. And I remember calling back to Copenhagen, calling home and, just being ecstatic and excited about feeling so happy and finally feeling that I was in charge of my life and I could sort of run with it. And I remember her response being, are you moving to Lisbon to get away from me? And I thought, what, I'm not even, what are they talking about? I'm so happy. I'm sharing this, glorious news. And
yeah, how does this equal this?
Yeah. And so that was where I started, like, I felt that during my pregnancy, I saw some signs because of this new baby coming and some sort of like behavior that felt kind of hurtful in relation to that baby arriving. Also, when my baby arrived, it was sort of, it seemed like, she just couldn't really deal with the fact that I now had something that was more important to me than my relationship with my mother. And so, long story short, she finally came to visit, and at that point, I just really, really, really could see, like up front, the really hurtful in behavior. And it actually wasn't until she came a second time, surprising us with two of her friends doing a kind of intervention and harassing us by our door and just like
Doing an intervention.
Yeah. Truthfully, Jessica, like the reason why this is just so divine was because that was actually the day that I knew that I had to share this on social media, that I started to share and talk the truth about my life. That was a day where I was making a bath for my son, like an evening bath around 8 o'clock. And it was sort of all dark and we like to dim the lights and sort of like really make it so like, okay, we change the vibration and all that. And I remember seeing this like orange light from the kitchen, and I thought, that's weird. And because of the water being heated up by gas, I sort of like, okay, let me just go and check it. And there was a huge fire in our gas tank.
There
right?
what?
Yeah.
Wow.
There was a huge fire in the gas tank, or in the water, in the tank, heating up the water with the gas, right? And so I was like, trying to be calm and calling my husband and be like, there's a fire. And we sort of like, internally panicked, because like, what do we do? And we started like knocking the doors on our neighbors' doors, but it's also that nobody opened up. But finally we got to somebody who could then help us with it, and we got it turned off. And an hour later, Jessica was like knocking on the door, like, what now? And we don't open for people. We didn't at that time open for people. We were not expecting anybody, and we just, had this crazy experience. And having, you start in the moment, you're just like, okay, I got my child. Like, what's more important than my child? And you sort of go into like a survival state.
Yeah.
They're firing you, right? And an hour later, it started knocking the door, and we didn't open, and just kept knocking. I thought, that's weird. So I went to look into the hall, and I saw a friend of my mother's, and I thought, that's weird, because we're in Portugal and she's from Denmark, so we're Copenhagen. So I was like, and we did not expect her, and she'd never been at our place. So I thought, that is truly weird. And I had this feeling of like, there's something in me, just like, no, just like, no, like, no, And she started like talking through the door, and I told her, like, get away from the door. And I also didn't feel like letting her in, because I knew the relationship she had with my mother, which was just like, why are you here? You don't even really connect with my mother. So it was really weird. Then I saw another friend of hers starting, and I looked through the what's it called, that sort of
the peephole.
Peephole, exactly. And she was standing with a piece of paper, and I thought, like, what is happening? And we were living at the end of a long hallway. So our door was at the end. And I saw these two people, and I thought, okay, when I saw that second friend, I felt like I've known these people, these women, my entire life, basically. And there was something about her showing up, and I felt like, oh my God, no, like, okay, I know that you are here. The reason why you're here, there's some kind of love behind your presence here. I could feel that. So I opened the door to say like, oh, well, I don't know why you're here, but you guys, you shouldn't be here. And then at one point, my mother, she appeared, she was standing behind a wall, behind a corner, and she suddenly appeared out of there. And I thought, what is this? It was almost like, some of these like horror movies, and I'd only watched those kind of movies. So it was like, it was such a crazy experience. And I had my son on my arm, and he started to get anxious. And like children, they're so intuitive, and I could just like feel, okay. Suddenly I felt like I was under attack. And so I felt like, okay, I don't want to be in this situation. And at the same time, I felt like I don't want to engage with these people because of the energy that I just felt. So I turned around and trying to get in, and one of my mother's friends, she grabbed my arm and holding me back. And so
When
at
you're
that
holding
point,
a child?
Yeah. Oh my God, Jessica, that's just like, I don't even, that's one of the reasons why I really.
That would trigger me into some
Oh.
psychotic protective mechanism.
Oh yes. I mean, I've been refusing to go back to that memory, obviously, because it's just been really, really like, yeah. I just remember like there was a strength within me that I don't know where it came from, but I just poof her to the side, poof her, saying it like in a mild way, and got on the other side of the door, and I was just like what happened? And I told my husband, like, record this. So he did. And that's also why I feel like I can sort of tell this story like in such a way, like it's not just a memory. We documented it. So we documented the fire. I started sharing about the fire on social media because I was like, what is this? And so we documented it and pictured it, and I started telling that story. And it all came from a desire to just speak my truth, because I've been feeling that my entire life I've been shunned from speaking that truth. And suddenly I felt like I was no longer under the domain of my mother, of my parent, and that I had my own sort of to protect and to stand up for. And that allowed me just to start sharing and to start speaking about toxic relationships, basically, with your parents, and about how that all dribbles down to basically all the kind of relationships that you then create from there. And in my own process of discovering and uncovering and figuring it out, because this was then not just that event, they kept staying there, and there was a lot of yelling through the door and leave us alone and crying, and like suddenly he started to cry and scream, and it was horrifying because they were just insisting on staying there and invading, and I couldn't figure out why. That was sort of our big mystery, was like, what do you want? Why are you here? And there was no answer from there. There was just this kind of manipulative behavior of not answering the questions and just saying, we'll come back tomorrow, we'll come back. So are you saying we can come back tomorrow? And we're like standing on the other side of the door, like screaming. So you're like, no. This sort of like, I can laugh about it now. I can talk with you about it in this way, because you can sort of see the insanity, right, of the behavior.
Yeah.
And again, I'm grateful because we got it recorded, and I just remember, like, at one point where I really felt that I mustered up and yelled directly to my mother, like something according, like, leave us alone, or can't you leave us alone, like, listen to my son, he's crying. And her response was, oh, Beatrice, it's so nice to hear your voice. And at that point, there was something in my sort of psyche that just clicked. I was like, whoa. And I get chills when I talk about it now, because it was like, whoo, what?
Yeah. A familiar pattern. You like,
oh.
you accidentally became the observer of this pattern that you were blind to your whole life.
Yes. I call it, in Danish, I call it like illusionsbrud, that's what it's called. But basically in English, we call it like a break with an illusion, right? I broke out of that illusion of that love relationship or relationship with my mother. I was living in that bubble of a love relationship. So, or a caring relationship, because I realized, she was not even listening to the words I was saying. She was not listening even to the vibration of those words. She was listening to just the fact that she was hearing my voice. And that took me back to my entire like childhood, adulthood, basically, of having my boundaries crossed several times, and just because she wanted to hear my voice. Calling me down on my phone, just like, and when I answered the phone, what, did something happen? What happened? She was like, no, I just want to hear you. Like that sort of behavior. And just after that event, it was like, whoa. And then the next day she showed up again. And then the next day she showed up again. And that lasted for a week, and I documented it. So I talked on my social media. I was crying on social media. I was just being me. I was just showing, and a lot of people that knew me was like being so compassionate and loving. But I also started talking with a lot of other people who had that same experience of toxic and codependent relationship with their parents not respecting their boundaries, and parents sort of enacting this, I would say, misunderstood way of love. And I just remembered there was this what happened, or the day that was then the last day of the harassment, that was actually the morning that we were moving out of that place. So again, it was just a divine of show up in a week just before we were moving from that apartment. Yeah. And that day we were flying in the evening, and in the morning when I opened up the door to take my son up on the rooftop, because we were living just on the penthouse floor. And I remember we would go up there to sort of like get a perspective of the world, and there's a pool there, and just to get some fresh air. And when I opened the door, there were these red spots, red dots, and I can't say what it was, because truthfully I don't know. But there was these like red dot spots all over our where our doormat used to be lying. And they were like all dripped all the way down the hallway and down the stairs. And I just remember like started taking my phone up, and I started recording it, and I was live on Instagram, and I was like showing it to people, like, this is what I'm dealing with, and talking about it. And I just realized, like I'm never going back. I'm never going back to that relationship. I'm just never. And at that point, that was where the healing started. That was where everything just like, okay, well, that was where it really became painful. And because I had to realize my relationship with my mother, and basically my entire childhood and all that trauma of that childhood. And that I've been so, good at covering up, being a student and always doing good in school and everywhere else, and always smiling and always just being like there to help, and nothing was wrong except from everything at home, basically, right? But I never talked about it because of, I think, the way I was brought up. And so that allowed me really to feel that I could be a beacon of light for somebody, because of how many people reacting to it and reacting to that sort of thought of our culture. We never, in our culture, we never really question the relationships with our parents. It's like these holy grails of relationships, which is just kind of, I just started to question that and be like, why is it that we have to hold our mothers and fathers dearly when they truly do not hold us dearly? Why is it that we have to continue to have these?
Uh-oh. I'm sorry, you froze a little bit. Hopefully you'll come back.
Relationships and not look at them. I was even in therapy for years, but I would never ever talk anything that would not shine with light on my mother.
Sorry,
in the way she wanted it.
You're frozen. Oh, okay, you're back now. Okay. Okay, so you froze at why do we have to hold them so dearly when they don't hold us?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. I started to reflect on that, and I started to question those relationships, and started to question the holy grail of our parental relationships, basically. And I was in therapy for years, and I would never, ever, ever say anything that was not shining the light on my mother the way that she taught me to. I would never say anything negatively about her. And so I was within myself, I was never allowed to go into a place where I could actually heal, because I was allowing another person basically to be there and control how I was dealing with it, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so actually it was what sort of helped me sort of stand really strong in that process of just knowing from deep with this emotional move, like deep water. I felt so strongly about my values because I've been blessed to be taught by this Danish philosopher who basically rediscovered an ancient Greek leadership coaching practice, basically called Protreptic. And it's even difficult to say, but it's called Protreptic.
Protreptic.
Yeah. And it comes from a word protrepos, which means to turn towards. It's Greek. And so it's about turning the individual towards itself, turning the human
towards.
Yeah, towards, yeah.
It all, okay, you're incredible. It all flies around.
Thank you. Yeah, because I just before I gave birth to my son there in 2017, I was finishing up my master's degree, and I took this election course. It's called, yeah. Well, it was just this extra course that I had to take to finish up with the right points and all that. Huh. And it was about coaching, and it was this old man coaching this course or teaching this course, and he had this gem called Protreptic that was like he rediscovered and redeveloped and further developed it. And I just got so intrigued by it because it was just like, this is about turning the human being towards yourself, basically from something that's 2,500 years old, already discovered by people living long before us, about how, and at that time, it was about how to teach a leader to be as the leader of the people. So a leader that would treat people or human beings as other human beings and not misuse power, and turn that human, like basically help that leader become aware of the value of that leader's values, so that you could make your values real, and so that you can set yourself free, so you can set other people free, basically. And I just got intrigued, and I started to study that. And I asked him first, like, if he was willing to do something with me, just willing to do a program with me. And we agreed upon something that would fit, because I just gave birth to my son, so I couldn't do his original offer. So he agreed upon teaching me. And in the process of being taught, I got bankrupt. I got totally broke because of this money situation with my mother, and she asked for the money back, and I said I didn't want to give it back to her because I had already invested it in my business. But there was something within me that was telling me, I don't know whether I can actually say like that, because I don't know if it was, I just gave her a bunch of money back, which put us in the situation of not being able to pay our bills. And when I look back, I don't regret it, even though it was such a struggle. And but it allowed me to really also heal all that money trauma that was then in that relationship, controlling that relationship too. But so at one point I just had to tell him, hey, I can't pay you back for the time you spent with me. And he just decided to be so generous and give it to me. So I feel like, I have this, I have this treasure, this Protreptic treasure, this practice, basically this leadership coaching practice that has allowed me to stand so strong within myself, because I knew what I value. I knew how important freedom was to me, because I went through the process of talking about freedom with him. And I think the reason why I loved it, because I think I'm a linguist within I think I'm a linguist within, but I love the focus of that practice. Basically, it's you take the point of departure in a word, and it's not just a random word, but it's sort of the word you sense the other person, and you figure, okay, what kind of word that is connected to a value, a core value, could resonate with this person. And you have a conversation which is open, philosophical, existential. So you just ask. It could be, what is love? Yeah,
I want to know a word.
Yeah, no, but basically, like, well, love could be a word, or decency, or I had conversations with him about responsibility, and truth and leadership in just these freedom. And what's beautiful about these words, I mean, basically, they all sort of have a root that goes like so far back to, in this theory, or in this sort of train of thought, to a language called Proto-Indo-European. Let me say that again. In English, Proto-Indo-European.
Proto-Indo-European.
Yeah, P-E-P-P-I-E. That's the short. P-I-E.
Okay.
Proto-Indo-European. And
you're gonna have to email this and we'll include it.
I will absolutely. So you can see Protreptic spelled, and you can see all of it spelled, because that's, I rarely talk with people about this because it's even difficult to pronounce, right? So it's like, but it's just, we can sort of find, there's a reason why we say what we do, right? And I think for everybody actually to sort of, everybody can benefit from becoming aware of what you say, because that can allow you to understand why you're saying it, right? So when you sort of have this process of reflecting upon words that are connected to core values, you start to understand yourself. You start to understand how your own belief system, your own way of practicing these core values, because we all practice them in different ways. I mean, you practice truth in your way, and I practice it in my way. But they're all universal. They're all values that we as human beings value. All concepts that we value, right? And so that just led me to deal not that much with the emotional experience, or the emotional trauma, the emotional wounds, but I was like very clear in terms of how I wanted to act and who I wanted to be during that adulthood trauma experience, because I knew that truth was important to me. I knew that freedom was important to me, and I had come to terms with those, with what that meant to me. And that meant, not pursuing other people's agendas, not living my life on other people's terms, but truly to live freely meant for me to live in love. And that also meant to understand, okay, well, do I experience that love in my relationship with my mother and those people around her? And no, I didn't. And it sort of led me to look all around me and see what are the kind of relationships that I have, and just having to go into that dark place.
A lot of bravery.
Oh, well, thank you. I guess I have that sort of philosophy, of, I don't want to go there, so I gotta go there. Yeah, that's sort of
you're like, no. Oh, there's that.
Yeah.
Marks the spot.
Yeah. And I actually didn't know I had that philosophy before. I went to this like baby class with my second son, and there was this lady saying, okay, you can choose. What do you want to do? Do you want to spin around with your children, or do you want to do this other activity? And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to spin around, so let's do it. And she's like, okay, hey, well, that's rarely what people want to do. Like, everybody avoids spinning around because it makes them busy. But you're different. You say, you have this perspective, and it just gave me, sometimes you need other people, right? To give you that perspective on yourself. And I just could see that pursuing and going into those things that I'm just, fearful of. But wow, I got talking for a while. But that was actually my inspiration to start sharing, to be open on social media. Yeah.
Wow. That's, you're so brave to experience that kind of pain, because I think almost everyone in the world has some element of codependence or some level of codependence. It's just how functional is it? And do you see it yet? Because so I think, but you're so brave to take that experience and transform it into, I'm going to show the world and I'm going to be the light of, hey, it's okay. I'm going through this too. And I am going to get out of it. And this is how I'm getting out of it. And you can also too. And I will help you. And then tie it back to the words. I love okay. So we were talking about words right before we started recording. And she said, that's what I really want to talk about today. And then by accident, it came full circle. So
yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about codependence and toxicity after reading your website. Your website is gorgeous.
Thank you.
So I was thinking about it and I was like, wow, codependence did actually serve, because if we're going to go into stereotypes, the man is usually the avoidant that works too much and, oh, I'm too busy and I'm not now. And the woman is alluring and manipulative and getting you to do something. And so, but the man is like strong and, no, I want this now, or I don't want this now, and just like kind of lays down his strength. Whereas the woman physically doesn't have that kind of strength. And so she kind of capitalizes on the other things that she has. So those are the stereotypes. But I think it was a successful coping mechanism for survival. Like, through our human evolution. And that's what I was thinking about yesterday, of like, actually, I think codependence was a survival instinct that was successfully used for years, for hundreds, millions of years. But now that, you know, in today's culture, we have a whole lot more independence. We've kind of been able to physically break away from this dynamic, but the emotional strings are still so like glue or chains, or it's so sticky and it's so hard to break apart from. And I truly believe that 90%, maybe 80% of the people that are acting out these pretty unhealthy codependent behaviors don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so like, they're just trying to show their love, but they don't understand how it's hurtful. And so it becomes this like hurt both directions. And like, you just have to be as strong as you are and just rip yourself out and like, I'm sorry, heal yourself. But but I think because of our current society, that we have the financial and physical ability to physically get away from it without our life being in danger, this codependence dynamic became a thing that we're able to identify and heal because of the ability to separate. Because that was my, as I was reading your website, that was the insight that came to me, and I wanted to share that. Did that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, it does. I mean, the emotional connection, that was really what got to me. That was what took me down, basically. That was where I realized the codependence.
Yeah.
That was sort of, and also in that sort of like energetic bond or emotional bond, really, that was full of these these negative stereotyping concept that you talked about before, full of those kind of actions, full of that avoidance, ignoring, demanding, manipulating, and in one sort of energetic mix. And it brought me to my knees. I was out because of that, because of how I was just like that. So you talked about before we started the interview, that inner child of yours, that inner child of mine that was experiencing since childhood these behaviors, right? That's what I've had to heal energetically. And as you said, very importantly, I think that it's unconscious. Most people do not know that they're doing it. They do not know that that's what they're doing. They see it as love, which was also interesting in terms of my own mother, because it's been a long process of stalking and what's come after that. But it doesn't seem that she understands that she's being hurtful, even though she's been told several times. And so a lot of my own process had to do with learning to love myself, basically, and learning to forgive. And holding her in a light of love, and holding her in a light of forgiveness, and holding myself in a light of love and forgiveness, basically, so that I could release that emotional cord, or what would you say,
I think an emotional cord is, so when I do my meditation, the visual that I get is like, it's like a bi-directional route, and the tendons, the feelers, they have a mind of their own, and they know where to go, and they get very tangled. And it's like, so when I've done my meditations a couple times, I just was so frustrated, I ripped out the root, and literally it ripped out half of, well, not literally because I'm in meditation, but it ripped out half of my heart. And it's like, oh, wow. So like, then I spent another hour, and so I noticed, so I'm like trying to show you my heart.
I feel,
So I noticed that on both sides, the root that I just ripped out and my heart was reaching to reconnect. And I was like, no. And I kept like washing over I don't remember which meditation you watched, but very often I do gold energy, or I bring in a color, whatever feels nourishing. And I just kept like washing over this gold energy, like just being in a really, really purifying stream, and just, that the water is doing good. It's filling you up. And so that's what I just visualized until it felt complete. And sometimes when I get to those very painful meditations, it takes 2 or 3 hours.
Wow.
But that's the visual, is like just this root with these very long feelers that have a mind of their own, and they know like, oh, there's this itty bitty crevice to reach into.
Oh, that's just makes a lot of sense to me. It's like, so like, wisdom dawned upon me. Thank you for that imagery, because it makes a lot of sense. Because I've in the process of healing from this experience, I've encountered, she came, my mother came to me, but she found me in different places. And I realized that I had to work with that element of me hiding from her. And because it was like no matter where I went, she found out where I was living. And she would come and go, and, you know, like she would go around our building, or sometimes she would bring friends and they would go around, or sometimes she would bring things and give to other people to give to me, and just stuff like that that would really creep me out, and that I wouldn't like, that I didn't like. But it somehow it got to me, and it was like something. I always almost like wonder whether it was like something calling it, or something, I mean, connecting, even though I was, I mean, mentally cutting her off, but there was something that somewhere, some place within me that hadn't healed that connection. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. To see, okay, well, that mind of its own, and those, yeah, reaching for each other, because
Codependence is tricky. And you know, I first got into codependence because of my dissatisfaction with my dating. Oh no, you froze again. Well, everybody, I'm sorry that she keeps freezing.
Is it mine? Okay, it says my internet connection is unstable. That's what it said.
But so I'm actually having a ton of fun talking to you. So we're gonna make that part 1, and now we're going into part 2.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. So you just let me know if you have to go.
I'm here.
Yeah. So the reason I got into codependence was because of my dissatisfaction with my relationships, dating. And one of my friends recommended a book to me, and I would not read it for like a year. And I was like, no. And
don't show me the truth.
Yeah, but I kept asking the same questions. Why is this happening? Why did they do this? So I learned when I read the book, I was like, oh my God, I am the codependent, and I keep chasing these avoidance, and I need to heal this in myself. And then just, well, I've always hyperanalyzed, but then I go into hyper analysis, and I'm like, oh my God, I do these things that I don't like it when other people do to me, and I do them.
Yes.
And so that began the codependence obsession deep dive.
Cool.
Is Pia Melody. I think it's called, I don't know where it is.
You're looking around.
But I'll include it with them. The author is Pia Melody, and I think it's called Love Addiction.
Because what you're saying is I recognize that a lot, because then I have to sort of look at myself, obviously, and see, hey, I'm actually being really destructive in my own love relationship. And not just, and for me, it started, I actually recently came to that realization, because I had to sort of look through. First it was everybody else outside of my mother. And then it came to my mother, dealing with her, the root sort of to, then I looked at my relationship with my children, because I could see suddenly how I was being hurtful. I was being rejected, and I just like, that became a really like strong motivational force for me to look at what am I doing, because the innocence of children is so obvious. You don't get caught up in, or you can, but but luckily I could see, that my children deserve better, obviously. And then I started to now come to the process of healing my relationship with my husband, who has been standing by me in this entire process and enduring everything that he, as well as the observer of what was going on, and also experiencing what went on with my mother, and then also experiencing our codependent dynamics as well. And whoo, is it freeing? And as well, I mean, this is where I feel a lot of women, they contact me and they're like, oh my God, how did you get to a place of love? How did you get a place to a place of trust and freedom? Because I have been in therapy for so long, and they're experiencing this hurt in their love relationships, basically. And they found, I see that most actually find it difficult to recognize and realize and heal the fact that it comes from their own parents, because that means that they have to look at their own parents, and they have to look at all of their other relationships, not just their love relationship, but their friendships and their co-workers. And it's like this entanglement of relationships. And that makes a lot of them not want to deal.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then it's something that is like put in the drawer and then put away. And the hurt and the blame and the pain continues. And eventually it will ruin a perfectly healthy relationship. I mean, beyond that codependence or the dysfunctional relationship patterns, because it's patterns that we can heal if we're willing to look at it.
Yeah, you can heal it. Yeah.
You can heal it. But it requires that you look at it, and that's what most people don't want to look at it. And
there's so much attachment in there that people, I think it's the attachment that blocks them. It's like, no, if I recognize that my parents have this unhealthy pattern, it is toxic, or, then that means they're bad people and they never loved me. And no, it doesn't. They still loved you, but they were acting out these unconscious hurtful things. And you still had a good childhood. And it's like, there's so much attachment that I think there has to be a massive amount of pain for people to be willing to dig through it. Because a lot of people want to just like, that means everything was horrible, just throw it all away. No.
What did you do to heal your codependence, dysfunction?
Still working on it.
Yeah.
But a lot of studying, a lot of meditating, and I talk about her so often. I have never met her, but someday I will probably freak out if I do. She's a Teal Swan on the internet. You've heard of her?
Yeah.
She does a lot of events in Copenhagen. So I've never met her, but I read 2 of her books, and I want her third. She actually has a 4th book now, but I want her 3rd book as well. So I think she was one of the most pivotal people for me. And she helped me to dissect it all. And so because so she sees energy as a physical thing, where I'm very grateful I don't see energy as a physical thing. I just get a knowing. But because she sees it as a physical thing, her description of it is so detailed and so accurate. And that helped me. Each video of hers or each book of hers helps me to dig even deeper and to dissect even deeper. And then I have a committed practice, just like you do, of journaling and why did that happen? And now I know enough that when something hurts, okay, there's some unresolved stuff there. So let's dig into it and we can heal it and then things will get better. And so I'm constantly going deeper into things. And then I was a flight attendant for 10 years, and so like observing people and then being obsessed with how people think and like what makes them tick and why are they doing that? Why? Since I was a little kid, my mom would tell me how annoying I was as a baby, saying, why? But that really is the absolutely most important thing to me, is why. So when I was a flight attendant, I would just pay attention to people and, oh, why are they doing that? Okay. And then everything relates to everything. And I love learning, and every day I get like something clicks into place. We'll have to talk again for sure.
Yeah.
The conversation's not over yet, but we have to talk again.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Did that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah, I feel complete, Jessica.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, so if people want to work with you, what can they do? What avenues can they work with you?
Thank you for asking that question, because that is somewhat exciting to me and really new to me. Because I just worked on something that I call Liberty and Love membership. And that is basically sort of a monthly personal growth and spiritual healing membership for women exclusively, to stay consistent and committed and to gain a community of other people obsessed with personal growth and healing. So they can work with me through that Liberty and Love membership, which is on my website, beatrice.com/liberty and love. No, actually it's /coaching. So I got to work on that. Right now it's /coaching, but I think it needs to be Liberty and Love.
BeatriceSavage.com.
BeatriceSavage.com. That's the easy way. Thank you. And also on Instagram at Beatrice Savage. Yes. Thank you. And I'm launching it today. So it feels like, oh, this is just such a divine.
Hey, celebration.
That's why I'm like, yeah, that's a huge step for me. And it's a little bit daunting. And at the same time, it feels like I can't I've been holding it off too long now. And it is time to sort of start helping other people and start helping other women dealing with or wanting to live their life in freedom and in joy and love, and no longer want to stay in those disempowering places, right? So yeah, that's where.
That's amazing. So check out her website. It's absolutely beautiful. And thank you for your time today, Beatrice. And I love the butterfly in the background. I have butterfly art throughout my house as well.
We connect. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me here on your channel. I'm so grateful for being allowed to talk with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll send the books to you.
Yes, and also send details and we'll talk again. Yes, exactly.
We will. Okay. Have a great day, Beatrice.